Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Low Season Traveller Insider Guides. I'm your host, Jed Brown, founder of Low Season Traveller, and this week we're delighted to be joined by Hicham Alaoui, who is the co-founder of Experience Morocco, a travel company which creates experiences that open minds and invite guests to build a lasting connection with this wonderful country. And in so doing, Hicham believes that travel can be more than tourism. It can be a unifying experience that makes the global feel a bit more local. So join us as we travel to a land of snow-capped mountains, blue cities, bustling bazaars, 100 tagines, and lots of Moroccan mint tea. Enjoy. So, Hicham, you are most welcome to the Low Season Traveller Insider Guides podcast. Great to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm very well, Jed. Thank you for having me.
Very good. It's our absolute pleasure. First of all, just for our listeners, just let us know, where are you right now exactly?
I am in Casablanca, Morocco.
Casablanca sounds very romantic. And first of all, give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself as well. Obviously, you're talking to us today about Morocco, so you are a Moroccan national, I guess.
Correct. Yes, absolutely. Yes, I will give you the short bio. I don't want to bore our listeners with all the details of my life, but it is helpful to situate some context. So my name is Hicham. I'm one of two co-founders of this company called Experience Morocco. And the story of our business is a little unusual in the sense that my co-founder and I did not set out to begin in the world of travel. We met while getting our MBAs in the United States as young Moroccan students who'd each started his career in the world of finance and technology, respectively. So really nothing to do with the world of travel. But upon arrival at university, our friends asked us to put together a journey for them to see Morocco through our eyes. And we reached out to 4 companies that do what we do today to ask them to put something together for us. And honestly, we felt underwhelmed by what we received back in terms of proposals and circuits. And we felt like we could put something together that would be a bit more unique if we did it ourselves. And in the process, sort of fell into the wonderful world of travel by realizing that there were a myriad of opportunities to do things off the beaten path and sort of unusual in the way in which we present our country. So we put that trip together for our friends and decided to make a go at building a different type of travel business in Morocco. And that was 7 years ago now. So a lot has happened since, but that's how we got our start.
I love that. What a great story. It's so interesting. Sometimes you come across many people in our industry actually that just kind of fell into or accidentally ended up in the travel industry. And I remember my first boss actually at Thomas Cook years ago, a guy called Dermot. No, it wasn't Dermot. It was another guy, John. And he said to me, Jed, welcome to the travel industry. You'll never leave. If you've got a passion for travel. And actually, I was thinking, what do you know? And here I am, I'm nearly 50 years of age and, still clinging on in the travel industry. But it's a fun industry though, isn't it, right?
It is absolutely. I think it's quite unique to make a living by showing people a way to expand their horizons. There are a few professions that enable you to do that. And I'm very grateful to be a part of this industry.
Yeah, me too. So, listen, let's get straight into it. Morocco. Now, I've had the pleasure of being in Morocco only once, personally, and that was in Marrakesh, and it was for a convention, typically. So I haven't, for all intents and purposes, I always say on those Facebook quizzes where it says, where have you been in the world? I do click off Morocco, but if I'm honest, and I will be honest with you and our listeners now, I don't really consider that I've experienced Morocco. At the very base level, have I experienced Morocco? Not really. So let's start off by, first of all, when are the low seasons in Morocco? And then let's get a little bit more into what we can do in Morocco and what we should know about Morocco. So when are the low seasons, first of all, just so we're clear on that?
Yes, so the low seasons would be considered January post the New Year's period, so January sort of 10th onwards, February, and then you've got May, June, July, August, certainly. And then there's one that is a very peculiar quirk of Muslim countries, which is the month of Ramadan. Now, for those listeners who aren't familiar, this is a month during which we fast from sunrise to sunset. And the quirk of this month is that it is based not on the Gregorian calendar, but on the lunar calendar. So what that means is that it moves up by roughly 10 days every year. And so in the course of our lifetime, as a Muslim, you will fast in the summer, in the winter, and so forth. So, but the point, the reason I'm bringing this up is whenever Ramadan falls. So, for instance, in 2021, we're expecting the dates to be, I believe, it's going to be April 20th to May 20th, right? But then the following year, it'll be April 10th to May 10th. But whenever Ramadan falls, it's typically a period that most travel agents recommend avoiding, simply because of some of the quirks of Ramadan and the way in which life is structured. But I look forward to telling you more about that, because it's actually a really superb and interesting moment to visit the country. But so whenever that falls, whether that's in December or, or in this case, April, May, that is typically considered a low season as well, because folks are encouraged not to travel during Ramadan. And we can get more into that later.
That's really interesting to me, because I've only been one place in Ramadan. So I'm not the world's greatest expert on Islam, far from it, and I was relatively ignorant actually. And I was in Jordan during Ramadan, and a lot of people were saying to me, "Oh, you need to be careful. It's Ramadan. It's not a good time to travel anywhere." And actually, look, I won't give you the big story, but it was utterly wonderful, because I actually learned so much about the way of life, and what an important part of the way of life Ramadan is. And then, of course, in the evenings, I just thought it was wonderful. It was like a celebration every evening out and about in Amman, and it was just absolutely glorious. But anyway, we'll get into that later. So I suppose the starting point really then should be, now we know when the low season months are. Why are they the low season months? We know for Ramadan. Why is it in the summer? Is it too hot, or is it usually considered too hot, or what's the traditional reason for that?
Yeah, so I'd say the real sort of opportunity in terms of folks being able to travel and enjoy Morocco without having really any downsides whatsoever would be those early months of January, February. Those 2 months, the weather is still great. I would argue some of the best weather year round. Not too hot, not too cold, really nice. But there are no crowds. Typically, people are constrained by their children's travel schedules with school, and so most folks don't end up traveling during those months. On the other hand, for the summer months, so really May onwards, and I would highlight July and August in particular, the typical reason people stay away from Morocco during those months is that they consider the weathers to be too warm, too hot, the temperatures are too high. And it's worth digging into that a little bit, because that really applies to certain parts of the country and not to others. And so, I hope we have a chance to sort of get into that, to explain how even during those months there is an opportunity for folks to come and visit Morocco, and the temperatures aren't a hurdle that people should keep them from visiting the country.
When we talk about it being hot in July and August, what kind of temperatures are we talking about? Because I'm always really mindful that if you look at the British market, the Brits go to the southern part of Turkey and Cyprus in July and August in their droves, and that's the absolute peak time. And the temperatures there would regularly get to 40 degrees. What kind of temperatures are we talking about here?
So this is what it's worth sort of digging into it a little bit more. And for folks who can't quite imagine Morocco on a map, there's a tremendous coast. So we have the country situated all along the Atlantic, and then on the northern part of the country, it's the Mediterranean. And so basically all along the coast, the weather is actually fantastic. Even during the summer months, you'd be looking at an average high of about maybe 33, 34. And an average low of somewhere around 23, 24. So in my opinion, perfectly fine and just glorious summer weather. However, as you go inland, and most people as part of their travels to Morocco wish to include a visit to particularly two places that are quite well known and certainly worth a visit, the city of Fez and the city of Marrakesh, which you've been to once. Those two places, by virtue of being inland, do get quite hot. And when I say quite hot, it can get into the 45 to 46 degrees. And so, the common wisdom, or the accepted practice, at least, even by the inhabitants of those cities, is to sort of stay indoors as much as possible during the day, and then, go out at night. So.
Fair play. Yeah, that's understandable. So then, you've mentioned there Marrakesh and Fez. Give us a little bit of an overview to Morocco, and what are the most popular places that you guys help travelers to see.
Yeah, Morocco is, I suppose, just like many other destinations. And we were talking earlier about the conversation you had with a fellow operator in Greece, and I was fascinated to hear about the different places he mentioned in the podcast. I think in all of our countries, we face the struggle of the places that people consider the must-dos, but then there's so much more. And so I will answer your question in two parts, right? The must-dos of Morocco are going to be Fez, the Sahara Deserts, and Marrakesh. Those three are considered to be sort of the must-do highlights of the country. Fez is the sort of the birthplace of a lot of the customs and traditions of Morocco, whether you think of the culinary crafts, whether you think of the traditional arts and crafts, things like leather, the working of leather, or silver, or brass etching, all these typical crafts originated in Fez. When you think of Morocco, the quintessential Moroccan postcard involves the Sahara Desert. So many people have this desire to spend the night in a nomadic type of camp and gaze at the stars, which are plentiful, and just have that Sahara Desert experience. So that's another. And then finally, Marrakesh. Marrakesh is both historically noteworthy, has a number of palaces. Certainly the Medina, which is the ancient city, is worth visiting with all of its quirks and labyrinthine alleyways. But in addition to that, Marrakesh has a plethora of activity to offer families with young children. There's fantastic nightlife. There's great hotels. So Marrakesh really has something to offer to all travelers. And when you combine those three, Fez, the Sahara, and Marrakesh, you're looking at a minimum of, in 8 nights. You could technically do it in 7. You'd be, running all around crazily. But typically 8 to 10 nights is what people spend just to do those three. Now, in our hearts, we love to encourage people to see other parts of the country, but it's always this trade-off of, we can pitch ideas around the uncovered Morocco. But unfortunately, because most people don't have, 3 weeks to spend in one destination, and they are unsure of when they'd be able to return, they want to privilege those must-dos. And so it's always that trade-off of, can we encourage people to go a little bit beyond the well-beaten path, while not giving up, the things that they absolutely must see.
Is it a question of, I've been speaking to, obviously doing a lot of podcasts over the past couple of years, and some people sort of say, look, there's that stuff which, everybody does. So if you've never been to Morocco before, like you say, Marrakesh, Fez, you got to do it. You got to do it. You got to see it. Is it then there's a second tier of, okay, you've been before, you've done your 7-8 days, you've done Marrakesh and Fez. What's the second tier? So if you're going back then for a second time, what kind of itinerary do people then tend to follow?
Yes. Well, I wish we had the chance to do this more often, right? Despite our very best efforts, people often leave telling us they can't wait to come back, but then, they've got their safari in Kenya, and then after that they want to go to Alaska and so forth. So, seldom do people end up coming back, but we have had over the years a few, parties come back, in one case 3 times, which was fantastic because they really got into the weeds of Morocco. So yes, the things to cover that are not sort of those top tier destinations, and I would say offer a more deep understanding of the place. You've got in the north of Morocco, people think of the famous port city of Tangier. And Tangier has a complicated history in its own right, but in the region of Tangier, there's a number of really interesting destinations. There's a village that has gotten increasingly popular, particularly due to social media, a place called Chefchaouen, which is this small village tucked into the mountains in the north of Morocco that has the particularity of being painted in bright shades of blue. So every single thing you see is in shades of blue. That is becoming more and more popular. Another village that is less popular but equally charming, and I would say even more interesting because there's fewer crowds, is a place called Asila. Also in the north of Morocco, a very small sort of fishing village, but very quaint and has a really strong charm and history to it. So that would be another example. And then if you venture into the south of Morocco, most people end up doing a little bit of a route or a circuit going from the Sahara Desert to Marrakesh. And they typically do that in 1 day, sometimes 2. If you are able to spend a little bit more time, there's a whole sector in the south of Morocco where you can dig into the history of the Kasbahs, these ancient fortresses, and really connect with the culture of that part of the country in a way that very few people get to do. So that would be another example. Last but not least, I'd be remiss not to mention the Atlas Mountains. So just a 1-hour drive away from Marrakesh is the entry point, or one of the entry points into the Atlas Mountains. There's a whole world of hiking, but also of other activities, whether it's paragliding, whether it's horseback riding, mountain biking, just a lot to do to uncover the Atlas Mountains in all of their beauty, not only the physical beauty, but also to understand the customs of the Berbers who live in that part of the country, whose way of life has been largely unaffected by the modernization of the rest of Morocco. So these are just 3 off the top of my head, 3 different parts of the country that few people get to experience, but that are really worthwhile.
Love that. I love that. I'm going to, I'll just point out to you, you might see me looking at my other screen, and the listeners that are regulars will know, whenever I'm speaking to a guest, I have Google Maps, Google Earth rather, on the other screen. So what I do is whenever you're describing any places, not only am I taking notes as to where they are, but I'm actually looking at where they are on the map as well, just so I can kind of zoom in and have a little bit of a look around. It's the next best thing to actually traveling, to be fair.
Yes.
Not as good, if I'm honest, but we do the best that we can. What's your, and I know this is, I always say this is putting you on the spot a little bit here. What's your favorite place in Morocco and why?
Oh,
It's
it
like
is
asking,
putting
it's
me
like
on the
asking your
spot.
favorite child or something,
Uh,
isn't it? It's hard.
yeah.
Is there
My
anywhere
favorite.
that just really you obviously you love your whole country, of course you do, but is there anywhere where you sort of think, you know what, that has I've got a soft place in my heart for that place?
Yeah, it's going to be a surprising answer, especially given what I just said about off the beaten path. And so I'll have to explain my answer. But my answer would be Marrakesh, and there's three different sort of components to that. One is personal. Growing up, Marrakesh was a place where our family went on holidays anytime we had a long weekend. And nowadays, I should mention, Marrakesh to Casablanca is a straight 2 hour, very easy highway drive. When I was growing up, it was about 4 hours down a mountain road. So it felt like a journey to get to Marrakesh. But so there's certainly a lot of just memories from my youth that make that place very special. Second is the landscape. So from most places in Marrakesh, you can look out and see the Atlas Mountains. Marrakesh is also known for its gloriously sunny weather. I think it's like got maybe 30 days of rain per year. So basically the odds are if you're in Marrakesh, it's sunny. And so you can see from the city, it's a pretty flat city. You can see out into the Atlas Mountains, and the combination of the red, there's this color. The red is the color of Marrakesh. All of the buildings are painted in this shade of red. So the combination of red as far as the eye can see, and then the snow-capped Atlas Mountains in the distance makes for a setting that I've always just found very beautiful. And then third is Marrakesh can be many things to many people. If you know Marrakesh properly, if you know to go beyond it would be the best way to explain this would be if you're from New York City, you don't really spend a whole lot of time in Midtown Manhattan, right? But you've got a lot of spots that well, whether it's in the outer boroughs of New York or even on Manhattan, but sort of the hidden parts of the island. It's a similar story with Marrakesh, right? So Marrakesh often gets the attention for its glitzy hotels and restaurants and these 5 big monument attractions. But if you go beyond that, there are parts of the city that are really cool. So for instance, one of the parts of the city that I like spending time in is there's a design district where Moroccan designers have their warehouses where they make furniture, they make art. It's not a very touristy part of town, but I just enjoy going for a walk in that part of the city and discovering these new workshops and new designers working on their craft. So that's one example of the ways in which Marrakesh can be fun, even if it's not in the usual definition of what you do when you're there.
Fair play. Absolutely love that. Talk to us a little bit about if we go to Morocco, and again for any of our listeners that haven't been to Morocco, what's the food like? What kind of food are we going to be eating when we're in Morocco?
Yeah, I think it really breaks down into 2 different situations. The first part is going to be if you're in any of the major cities, whether that's Casablanca, Rabat, Fez, Marrakesh. If you're in a major hub, it's really your choice. Should you want to indulge in Moroccan cuisine, obviously there will be tremendous options for that. However, for travelers who are more comfortable with food that is closer to home, there will be all of those options as well. Whether you want a burger, a salad, a sushi, or whatever. We often tell people, relax. You don't have to eat Moroccan food when you're in Morocco all the time. We have this expression that is to get tagined out, right? So the tagine is the main plate that we have in Morocco, and oftentimes, by day 4, 5, or 6. People are craving a burger or something different. And so I want to reassure any listeners out there that, Morocco can cater to many palates. Now, to zoom in on Moroccan food, we do have these staples that are somewhat equivalent to the Indian curries. They're called tagines. And much like Indian curries, tagines can be made up of any number of combinations of a different type of meat and different vegetables, whether it's, for example, chicken and potatoes, or it could be beef with green peas, or we also have a number of vegetarian options as well. And so part of the education that we try to pass on to our guests is to understand all the nuances of a tagine, because the plate itself is the same, right? So it's this earthen, orange-looking clay pot in which the food is served. And so upon first impression, it can seem like, oh, well, we just had tagine yesterday, we're having another tagine today. But we encourage people to really delve into their palates and understand that the spices and the mix is quite substantially different from one plate to the other. And so there's a whole world within that. And then also, obviously, there's couscous, which is a plate that is shared between Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, each country claiming that they came up with it first. But so there's Moroccan couscous, which is certainly worth enjoying. And then you get into a myriad of sweets as well. So I have a sweet tooth. And so in the world of sweets and desserts and pastries, there's a whole lot to uncover there as well. So really a rich, rich world of cuisine to dig into.
When we're talking about desserts now, you know, my ears especially pick up. First of all, I do love a tagine myself. I don't think I've had one in Morocco, which obviously I need to put right. But I wasn't aware that there were so many different types of tagine. Actually, I thought tagine was, you know, a tagine. You know, you have a tagine and it's standard all the time. But when you similar, you know, when you say it's sort of in that way similar to curry, as in, you know, there isn't in India, there isn't just one curry. There's you know, a million different types of curry. I hadn't realised
Right.
that about the tagine. That's fascinating to me, and now I'm kind of curious to try and taste some more in different varieties. But on the sweets, is it sort of, when you say about the pastries, is it sort of similar to baklava? Is it that kind of a deal?
There's one type of pastry that is similar to baklava, but then the traditional Moroccan pastry is very different. It's based on crushed almonds and dough and a lot of other ingredients that I'm not the best expert to describe, but they in taste and flavor, they are not similar to baklava. There's one particular pastry that is, but all the others are not.
They're different. God, I'd love to give them a try. Do you do? I mean, is there much sort of demand for, I guess, Moroccan cuisine experiences where people get to, you know, actually have a go themselves and try and sort of recreate different dishes?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number of things that we invite our guests to do, whether it's, you know, on the sort of shorter and easier end, as preparing traditional Moroccan bread, which is relatively straightforward, and then the bread is prepared in these traditional ovens, and then typically after about 10 or 15 minutes, you can enjoy your own fresh baked Moroccan bread along with a pot of mint tea, and that's a very standard and also delicious breakfast for many Moroccans. It's literally warm bread with olive oil and tea. That would be a pretty common breakfast, and it's quite delicious. And then on the more sophisticated end, obviously we have proper tagine, you know, cooking classes, whether that's in a somewhat professional setting, you know, where you have your own cooking station and the ingredients pre-prepared, or a more authentic version inside someone's house, you know, with a family cooking the meal. But that's something that's a bit more involved, takes a bit more time, but is also much more gratifying at the end when you can enjoy the meal that you prepared yourself. And I would say there's been an uptick in demand for culinary immersions of all stripes. You know, another thing that we do quite a bit in Fez is a tasting tour, wherein while we are providing background about the history and the culture of Fez, we're also stopping at different places and sampling different foods. And that's something that it's an activity that a lot of our guests have really enjoyed over the years. So I'd say overall, there's been a sharp increase in demand around wanting to understand local foods more.
It's part of the cultural heritage of a destination, really, isn't it? You know, as much as the buildings are and everything else, the food that's been around for, you know, for centuries. That's a key part of immersing yourself, I guess, into the culture of a destination, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. As long as people know there's still that pizza or that burger they can have at any point.
God help us. God help us. When we talk about different destinations, one of the things that we are obviously for low season travelers here at Low Season Traveler, naturally. And one of the sort of the key things, you know, I suppose an aspect of a low season traveler is that when you travel, yes, it's about sort of looking at the different places, you know, Fez, Marrakesh in this case, but actually it's about the experiences that you can have. Broadly speaking, what would you say are the, you know, 3 or 4 key experiences that a traveler should have when they visit Morocco that would help them to have a real understanding of the destination?
Yeah, so in no particular order, really the first thing that comes to mind is some experience of the Berber way of life. And so if you stick to Fez and Marrakesh, you're getting, you know, I always say the saying, history is written by the winners, right? And so it's a crucial part of Morocco's culture and heritage to understand, yet very few people take the time to understand it. So just to make myself clear, there were native peoples who lived in Morocco prior to the arrival of the Arabs and of Islam. And so those people were named later Berbers, but they do not call themselves that. So their own term is Amazigh, and they had their own language, distinct from Arabic, and which is still preserved to this day. And it's about 30% of the country is Berbers who speak that language. There's roughly 5 dialects, but they can understand each other. So they have their own language, their own culture, their own customs. And if you just do the Morocco 101 experience of the country, you will receive very little to no exposure about that. And given that it's 30% of the country's population and quite an important bit of its history, I think that's a shame. And so I would encourage people to make sure, as part of their time in Morocco, to include some type of an exposure to the Berber way of life. So that one easy way to do that is to go into the Atlas Mountains and to go hiking, because a lot of the villages in the Atlas Mountains are Berber villages. So that's a good way to get a 2-for-1. It's a nature-based experience, but also learning. But even if you don't do that, there are other ways to get exposure to the Berber traditions. For instance, many people think of Moroccan crafts, and they think of carpets. Moroccan carpets are fairly well known. And so one particular tradition of weaving those carpets is associated with a particular Berber region of the country. So that would be another example. You could, go into a workshop and understand the tradition and visit with the people who make those carpets. And so my point here is not to push one experience or another. It's just to say I would encourage anyone coming to Morocco to, at some point, try to get exposure to the Berber culture, the Berber way of life, because it does provide something very different to the architecture and the history that you will see, which is defined by the the waves of Arabs who came into Morocco and who today have basically overtaken the population. So I myself am largely an Arab descendant. 70% of the population today is of Arab descendants, right? So that's sort of the exposure that you will typically receive. But I do think that understanding the Berber heritage is one. So that would be one thing. Another thing that I would mention in terms of things that you should do is to understand what is a Medina, right? So this term Medina, it means ancient city, or in Arabic it means city. It doesn't mean ancient city, but it's come to denote the ancient parts of the city, right? In fact, in Fez today, people who live in Fez distinguish between those who live in the new city and the old city. So Medina al-Qadima, which is the old city, and Medina Jdida, which is the new city.
Yeah.
But so the concept of the Medina is found in Meknes, in Fez, in Marrakesh, in Essaouira, even in Casablanca, which people associate Casablanca as a modern city, but we do have an old Medina. And architecturally, it's important to understand the features of an old Medina, the reasons for which they were designed in the way that they were designed. People see these narrow alleyways, but they don't understand sort of the why behind it. It's particularly important as well, and this is sort of my third point, to experience a riad. And so when it comes to Moroccan lodging, particularly in the bigger cities, you will often have a choice between your standard Western chain hotels, your Sheratons and your Sofitels and your Novotels and so forth, and these traditional riads. So a riad is a type of building that was once a family home, that many of them now have been reconverted into boutique hotels, some as small as 4 rooms and other as large as 20 rooms in the case of hotels that have combined multiple buildings into one riad. But I would encourage everyone visiting Morocco to have at least one night stay. If you're not going to stay in riad throughout your whole trip, then you should at least experience it for a night. Again, because the experience will be much more authentic to the place than a standard hotel room, which you could get anywhere in the world. And so those would be the 3 off the top of my head: the Berber experience, visiting and walking around in Medina, in any of the cities of Morocco, and understanding that. And then third would be to stay overnight in a riad.
I love it. I think that's all we've got time for. That has given us a really, really good whistle stop insight into what Morocco has to offer. It flies really quickly, doesn't it? You're looking bemused. It's like, I know it does. It flies really quickly. I think what we'll have to do is, in a few weeks' time, or maybe a couple of months' time, we'll have to get you back, and I think we'll get a little bit more under the skin of some of these secondary and tertiary destinations. If you'd be happy to join us again in a few weeks' time.
Absolutely.
That would be wonderful. But thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. Greatly appreciated. Love the story of where your company originates from as well. I think that's just a really great story. And I just want to let our listeners know that if they'd like to visit you guys, socially distanced, on the website, then of course they can visit you at experiencemorocco.com. no apostrophe, it's all one word, experiencemorocco.com. And you can see a lot of what Hicham has been talking about today during this podcast, and see some of those fabulous destinations, and indeed what Experience Morocco offers for low season travelers in Morocco. But thank you very much again, Hicham, for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Really enlightening. I absolutely want to go back to Morocco now. So it's another one on my list. Once we're allowed to travel again, I make sure that I will come, and hopefully I'll get to see you in Morocco next time.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jed, and thanks for having me on the podcast. I appreciate it.
So there you have it. Huge thanks again to Hicham from Experience Morocco for his insights and company this week. And please do visit the experiencemorocco.com website to learn all about the culturally rich low season tours which Hicham and his team provide. In the next episode, we stay in Africa as we head south. In fact, we're heading deep south, all the way down to South Africa, as we learn about the wildlife and nature from our very special guest, Mr. Warren Pearson. You won't want to miss this episode, as we recorded it on Facebook Live earlier, and the feedback was amazing. Warren is fast becoming a legend due to his incredible and infectious passion and knowledge of the region, and of course, its wildlife. If you haven't already done so, please do like and follow the Low Season Traveller pages on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn and Twitter to see all of our new content and be in with a chance to win stays in top 5-star luxury properties, as well as being the first to know about our latest Low Season Traveller Live updates. And that's our podcast done for this week. Thanks as always for your company. Have a great week, stay healthy, stay safe, keep your travel dreams alive, and don't forget to share this podcast with your friends, family, and social networks. And finally, remember that now, more than ever, travel is better without the crowds.